So you have a brilliant video on YouTube about how to get a job in F1. We had one person writing said their son was inspired and now works for Ferrari at Maranello. So what advice would you give today to aspiring engineers?
Well, I'm very pleased to hear that he's got as far as working at Ferrari. I think the advice is very similar. There's no doubt in Formula One these days, and I was lucky in that my early career it wasn't the case, but these days academic qualifications are vital. There's a whole range of technologies and expertise needed in the Formula One team. These days I started, there were 11 people. Most Formula One teams are 600, 700, 800 people, have a wide variety of disciplines and ranges of expertise. But the first thing is the academic qualifications. That has to get you in the door in terms of an interview or an engagement with the Formula One team. And the thing I always looked for was people who had an experience in a team environment, people who had practical experience, people who had shown some self-initiative in terms of getting things done. And it could be as simple as, and I mentioned this I think in the video, it could be someone who showed me how they restored a classic car, or they'd built something that was a little bit unusual. And that just gives you that edge, that demonstration that you're self-motivated, that you're able to relish those challenges. And in a Formula One environment, that's what they're looking for. So often when a position becomes vacant, they have a lot of applications. So making yourself a bit more distinctive always helps. So that's the advice if you want to work in motorsport. It's a tough world. Maybe still try and find, before you enter Formula One, there's one or two other options in terms of motorsport you can get engaged in. That helps. So, but I don't think my advice has changed that much since back then.
Okay, fantastic. And staying with your career in Formula One for a few more questions, what was the hardest decision you ever had to make in your F1 career, and why did you take that decision?
I think there's always a lot of hard decisions in Formula One. I mean, I remember having a discussion with Michael that when he was driving for Mercedes, Michael Schumacher, and the fact that Lewis Hamilton was going to drive the following year. Michael's a very good friend of mine, and that was a difficult discussion. I mean, Michael was very professional about it, but I think that was a difficult discussion. I think when we had to downsize the Brawn GP team, we bought the team from Honda. 700 people, we couldn't sustain that number of people. For the company to survive, we had to drop to 400. And so telling almost half the staff that they were going to be made redundant was not an easy thing. I'd never had to do that before. So that was, but that was a decision born of necessity. And pleased to say that as the company grew after that, a number of those people came back and worked for the team. So, but yeah, there's always difficult decisions to make. Some of them on the sporting side, drivers. Some of the decisions in the races were not a lot of fun. having to tell one driver to back off or let another one pass was never a lot of fun, I promise you.
And you mentioned Brawn GP there. What inspired you to start that team in 2009, and also what was the reason for not continuing with it?
Well, starting it was necessity. Honda had withdrawn, and I think all of us were very frustrated because we felt we'd really were in a strong position with the team. And I'd been there about 18 months by then, and great group of people. I mean, they've gone on to demonstrate with the World Championships they won at Mercedes. So they were a great group of people. they just needed to have a bit more confidence in what they were doing, and I was hopefully able to bring that coming from Ferrari and telling them that they were as good as anyone that I worked with, certainly. So the team had come together very well, even in a short period of 18 months. We thought we had a great car, and I don't think we wanted to give all that up. So Honda withdrew. We went through a loop of alternatives. We had a number of people come and look at trying to buy the team, but none of them were, quite frankly, very plausible. It was in the middle of an economic crisis. So we did a deal with Honda, which fundamentally gave us enough money to run for a year. And at the end of that year, we could close the team down and still give all of the staff the same sort of redundancy packages they would have had if we closed it there and then. And Honda were very good in that respect. They gave us enough funding to run the team for a year. So it was necessity, really, that I never set out to own a Formula 1 team. It was fate, circumstance, and necessity. We didn't want to see that go down the drain. Why did we sell it? Well, as I just mentioned, we had enough money to last a year. We had a bit more, probably done 18 months because we obviously had a successful season. But we had no big sponsor lined up, and we won the World Championship. We were the fairy story, the big story, and we still didn't have any major sponsorship. And Mercedes were very keen to become more involved. And with Mercedes, because of the impact of Mercedes, they're able to bring Petronas and start to build the team up. So that was why we sold. And I stayed involved for another 3 years and then decided to step down.
What do you think the most valuable lesson you learned from running your own F1 team was?
Well, when the buck stops at you, I'd always had the cushion of working most of the time, certainly my middle career, the cushion of working for substantial organisations that had that security blanket. Ferrari, I'd gone to Honda, even Benetton was obviously a big organisation. So I'd always had that that comfort and never had to worry too much about it. I always needed to make sure we ran to budget, we did what we said we would do, and always concerned about performance, but I've never had that final, the final step was with me. So that was a very useful experience, and I think an experience has helped me with this stage of my career now. Maybe we'll come on to that a little bit later, but having been in that position and having known the bills need to be paid and working out where the money's going to come from and so on and so forth has been very useful.
Would you ever consider owning your own F1 team again in the future?
No. Only because of my stage of my career. I've got a very exciting job here. I'm 63, and it's a huge amount of energy. You need a huge amount of energy and commitment, and it's a very exciting thing to do. And we want to create an environment where having a team is sustainable and much more feasible than it is today. So, but I must say I don't have ambitions to do that again. I've stepped back from that. I'm doing a different thing now, so no, it's not appeal to me. But I can see the appeal. I can see the appeal having been involved.
So that's a definite no. But let's hypothetically say that you were running your own F1 team. Which two drivers on the grid would you like to have as your driver lineup?
Well, Michael Schumacher would be an obvious choice. In my career, I achieved a lot of success in my career with Michael because of Michael. So we had a very good relationship professionally and personally. And luckily, we never found those things were in conflict with each other. So Michael would be my first choice. And then, interestingly, I think I saw the dynamics of the different drivers and the way they work with Michael and how they helped or sometimes hindered the team overall. So if I was to pick another driver, it's a choice really of between Rubens Barrichello, who showed that he could work with Michael, or Jenson Button. I'd be fascinated to see how Jenson worked with Michael. Jenson's a fantastic driver, has a very good character and very competitive, quietly competitive. So I think it'd be a close call between the two of them. Probably Jenson, I think, because of the fact that I felt that group, those two drivers would work so well together. There was also a little bit of let's say prickly heat between Rubens and Michael when they were driving together. So that would be my choice, Jenson and Michael. So
Michael Schumacher stands out to you as the best driver you've ever worked with then?
Yeah, definitely. By quite a margin. I unfortunately never worked with some of the other greats. Prost, Alonso, of course Senna. Almost worked with all of them, but for whatever reason things didn't come together. But Michael by far, and certainly the most talented and professional driver I'd ever worked with.
Okay. So thinking of your days as a team principal, how much effect did you find that you could have on a driver if a driver was underperforming?
You can't ignore it. You can't just sit there and say, well, it will get all right by itself. I think you of course stress the fact that the team's a team. You're all together. Here's the final stage of that performance, and without him, it depends. If the driver's made a mistake, you live with it. That's part of the game. If he's slow, and I have to be honest, I never really had a situation where I thought a driver was underperforming to his ability. Some drivers are quicker than others, for sure. But you maybe go through a rough patch. There would be maybe the synergy between the driver and his engineers is not working, or but the basic solution was to talk, and to talk discreetly and talk quietly. You don't need to have those sort of conversations in a group. If you really feel the driver's underperforming is an issue, then finding some quiet time with the driver to understand what his thoughts, what's going through his mind, does he have an issue? Sometimes you change personnel around the driver, just not because you believe they need to be changed because they're not doing a good job, but because it gives the driver a restart. It gives him perhaps some more motivation. So, and they're all different. They're all vastly different. Michael very rarely needed any support. Other drivers needed more support. So they're all very different. But you do as a team principal that technical directors don't get away with it. They can't just ignore that. But certainly as a team principal, you need to be close to the drivers and nurture them and understand what they need.
Okay, now if you had to choose one, would you choose Brawn 2009 or Ferrari 2004?
I think it would have to be Brawn 2009 because it was such a fairy story. It was a contrast of that period of going to a hotel in Slough, with the Honda executives to be told that I thought we were just going for a strategy meeting or a review, and to be told they're closing the factory. And literally they were expecting us to leave that meeting and go back and turn the lights off and go home. And first of all, we explained you can't do that in the UK because of the employment laws. So, and secondly, we very quickly, it didn't take long between myself and the management group to say we're not going to let go of this that easily. So it was the whole contrast of those downs and the ups that came in 2009 that was so special. So I love my time at Ferrari. I love the people there. I saw them this weekend at the Goodwood Festival of Speed, and it was like long lost brothers. It was really nice to go in the garage they had there and say hello to everyone. They made me very welcome. So I love Ferrari. Special time when I did it, but I don't think you could invent a story of Brawn GP in 2009.
Great. So we're going to move things on a little bit more towards your current role. First of all, how do you find it to be on the other side of things after so many years at a team, and how do you find you're able to use your experience from the team side in your current role?
You know, that old cliche of poacher turned gamekeeper is absolutely true in this case. And often when we're discussing, debating things, I think about the position I would have taken as a team owner or technical director. And I think about the position I'm taking now. This is different to any of the roles I had before, and that was the reason I got involved. I think as I said earlier, I don't want to own a team again. I don't want to be in that position again. So this is the only thing that would have got me involved in Formula One again. So it doesn't have the cutting edge of the fierce competition that I was used to for most of my career, but that's a bonus for me now. This is much more about the long game, planning and thinking through, and I think we'll come to it perhaps in some of the later questions, thinking and planning through what we do for the future. And it's a new experience for me, it's new challenges, and that's what motivates me to get out of bed every morning. So that's the reason I'm doing it. It is different. But I think having been through the mill of everything, from a mechanic up to technical director, team principal, enables me to have as good an insight into the way Formula One works as anyone will have. And it's that knowledge and experience that I want to utilize to move Formula One in a better direction. I always feel Formula One is like an oil tanker. It's very difficult to move, but there's no reason you shouldn't move it. You just need to start steering it in a better direction, and you'll get there.
And thinking about the kind of various roles you've had on the two sides of the fence, if you like, is there a way that you can kind of compare the challenges and the rewards even, if you took your days at Ferrari, Brawn, and now F1 management?
I think comparing the rewards is more difficult in the sense that with a team it's very tangible in that you've got to score points, you've got to win races, and then you've got to win championships. So there's a very easy scoreboard of how you're doing as a team. So I was used to that environment. If you wanted to measure success for us now, it will be to maintain the integrity of the sport. That's very, very important. The quality of the sport. But just increase the engagement of the public in Formula One, increase the enjoyment of the fans, the existing fans we have, increase it in a way which, as I say, maintains the integrity of the sport, but find ways of engaging new fans in different ways, or just making them more aware of what Formula One is all about. It's a fabulous collection of technology and human competition. Ultimately the driver, but the car is so important in Formula One. We have to find that right balance. But I think that's what makes the sport so unique, that great drivers need a good car to win. They don't necessarily need the best car, but they need a good car. But then you can get average drivers with a fabulous car who can win races, and I think that's part of the wonderful dynamic of Formula One. But you need to keep that in the right levels. You can't have the technology ruling everything. And I think if you had all the same cars and the drivers were any variable, then that wouldn't be right either. So yeah, I think there's exciting times.
So we talked a little bit there about the challenges and the rewards. Could you pick out one role that you've enjoyed more than any others?
I think the thing that's motivating me with this is getting involved with areas that I've just simply not been involved with before. So understanding what the fans want and what they enjoy. It's an interesting balance, because the fans and enthusiasts know what they enjoy, but they don't know what might be around the corner that they could also enjoy. Fans and enthusiasts will be able to tell you what's there now, what they like, what they don't like, it's more difficult if you want to make a change to know how that change will be received, and if there's a problem, then you fix that problem and naturally everything should be better. If you're saying we're going to take Formula One in a different direction in the future, or we're going to add things to it, then judging what response you'll get from those things. And I think the rewards that I'm looking for in the future relate to that. So if we can create cars, create racing in the future that have if we end up in 2021 with cars that can race each other properly in close competition in a narrow field, then of course that would be fantastic. So those are the new challenges that I'm facing.
And you've talked a little bit there about some of the things you've kind of discovered since taking on this role. Can you pick out something that has most surprised you?
I think the passion of the avid fan. I took part in some of the surveys we did, where we had groups of fans and we were asking them various questions, and seeing the passion that some of the most dedicated fans had I just didn't realise it was at that level. So fans who watch every moment of practice and every moment of a race weekend, and their weekends are structured around the Formula One race. I knew we had a lot of passionate fans, but it was really quite moving to see the commitment that a proportion of our fans have to Formula One. It really is a big thing for them. We have a high level of responsibility to fulfil their enthusiasm in Formula One. So that was an interesting experience for me. I mean, when you're in a team, you meet lots of fans, but you don't really go into more deeply into how their lives evolve or revolve around Formula One. And going to some of those fan studies where we were able to observe the fans from a distance, so they didn't. They knew we were there, but we didn't have a direct connection. But listening to them talk about Formula One, listening to them talk about what they enjoyed, what they didn't enjoy, and huge amount of passion in those rooms when we were doing those surveys. So that was fascinating for me.
Yeah, it certainly is. So we'll move things on now to talk a little bit about the future of Formula One. Over the next 3 to 5 years, what do you think the vision and the goals for the sport are, and how are you and Liberty planning to deliver them?
It's yeah, I've been brought up in a world of incremental gains. So I think I've been brought up in a world where you're trying to improve by small percentages every area of everything you do. Lots of people think there's a silver bullet to winning in Formula 1. My experience is not. Sometimes you have a unique idea or concept that works, but most of the time it's about everyone in all of the team and in all of the departments finding a few percent, 1 or 2% better performance each year, and that accumulates into the car being better and more competitive. So in looking at Formula 1 today, I can see lots of areas where we're making incremental improvements. The way we present the show to the fans, and the way we do the TV, the experience they get at the track. There's a lot of areas we can improve. We've got to be careful not to fiddle, make lots of small changes constantly, because then it all kind of dissolves into a bit of a blur. Every day something's changing. So, and I think fans also welcome some consistency. We're having discussions about the point system at the moment, and it's a big decision to change it, because we shouldn't be. If we change it, it certainly needs to be left alone for 10 years. We don't want to keep messing with it. But so there's let's say the small incremental changes. I think the bigger things that we're trying to do is create cars that can race each other properly. And the cars certainly at the moment can't race each other properly. We've had some good races because there's been events that have happened during the race, a safety car or a crash or whatever, have brought the cars together, and they've all been on different tyres. So he's been on old hard tyres, he's been on new soft tyres, and suddenly we've got great action going on. What I want to see is that when cars in similar circumstances, same tyres, similar age, they're able to race each other, because you can't race each other at the moment. The aerodynamics are so critical that when one car gets into the wake of another, then it's very difficult to race. So you get the circumstances where at the beginning of the race there's lots of action, then it settles down, and then unless something happens, then there's not a lot of racing going on. I want to improve that. That's where we're going with the cars. And then, connected to that is the sustainability of the teams, to give the teams a better commercial base. And what that does is it makes them more competitive. And if you make them more competitive, you close up the field. And we want to limit the amount of money and resource that a top team can spend in Formula 1, because that is pulling them away again. So the broad aim is a much more competitive field of cars where they can all race each other very closely, and we can have great racing in the future. But to do it with integrity, we don't want to start using artificial means to improve the racing. It needs to be good at its core.
So that brings us on nicely to the next question, which is about if we're looking to increase and broaden the appeal of Formula 1, is it more about the on-track action and improving the on-track action than it is about off-track access and off-track events and interaction, the kind of which we've seen over the last couple of years?
Well, the second part of that, the off-track action, can't compensate if the on-track action is poor. So at the very core, everyone here, even Sean Bratcher is my commercial partner who's looking at that side. Sean is totally committed to the fact that racing is at the core of what we do. We don't want to flip it. We don't want to have a big show, but it's hollow at the core. So the fundamental part is great racing in great tracks, exciting tracks, with great drivers, big personalities. That's the core of it. But if you're going to come to a race and see all that, why can't you have fun in a fan zone? Why can't you get to meet the drivers with an autograph session? Why can't you, have your ticket put into a ballot to go on a truck to go around the track? I don't see why any of those things lessen the experience. They only enhance it, as long as you don't detract from the core activity. So I see those things as working well together. And if you come to a race and you're the petrol head, you're the fan, you're the enthusiast, and you bring your family, maybe they aren't quite so excited about Formula One, but they can do all this other stuff. And that will get them into Formula One. When they meet the drivers, they see the enthusiasm, they see the passion. So I don't see these as being opposing forces. I see them as being things that work with themselves, but racing's at the core.
Now, you also mentioned earlier that there's a kind of danger in fiddling too much and making too many changes. Are there certain aspects of Formula One that you would never consider changing?
I think the race distance is right. I think a 1.5 to 2 hour race is right. I always believe that, and interestingly, in all of the discussions we've had with the fans, there's a large percentage agree that you watch a football game, it's a couple of hours. A major sporting event has to have substance, and I think the duration of a Formula One race is right, and I think we need to get more action into a Formula One race, but a balance. We all know if we watched soccer games with the scores, 5-5 all or 7-5. Yeah, if soccer games were all the same, then they would they'd lose their attraction. You need a few dull games in a way to know when a great game happens. I'd like to see that in racing. We'll have some races which are fairly quiet and perhaps just a demonstration of someone's pure skill. We have a race where Lewis Hamilton or Sebastian Vettel dominates and wins the race. You should admire the ability of that driver in that capacity. But then we want lots of action as well. So we'll have a race where the positions change and maybe there's a safety car and things happen, and keep you on the edge of the seat in a different way. So, but I don't think I'd ever want to change the duration of the race.
Now, a couple of questions around the 2021 regulations. Do you have any concerns that some teams are genuinely going to be deterred from taking part in the future? The likes of Ferrari and Red Bull have expressed some concerns publicly already.
I don't have any major concerns. We respect the teams. I mean, they're putting a huge investment, a huge effort into Formula One. So we have to respect. And as I say, my history of being on both sides, I think, helps with that. So we have to respect their opinions and we have to respect their involvement. But I think those teams also will say that they know Formula One needs some direction from ourselves and the FIA, the governing body. So you see it in their relationships between the teams, and there'll be a period where some teams are aligned and some periods where they're not aligned, and often that's because of the on-track action or other things that are going on. I know as a team I was never always in the best place to decide what was best for Formula One, because I was so absorbed in my own objectives and ambitions within the team that and Formula One needs the commercial rights holder, ourselves and the FIA, to give the direction and encourage the teams to come with us. And I think they recognise that as well. So they're part of the process. Plenty of meetings going on, lots of discussion going on. So they're engaged. And I'd say in the last few weeks, last few months, I've got more and more confident and comfortable that we're going to hold hands together and go through this process.
And what about on the other side of the coin? What do you think the likelihood is of new teams or new engine manufacturers coming into the sport after 2021?
Well, that would be another measure of success. Quite frankly, I can't see a new team coming in today because the revenue distribution, the commercial distribution of funds, and the technical regulations are too daunting. And we want to create an environment where there's a queue of professional organisations wanting to own or be a Formula One team. We've always had this margin of teams at the bottom of Formula One, which are sort of hanging on by their fingernails and often falling. And we don't want teams in the future. We want quality competitors. We don't want people just making up the numbers or saying they're in Formula One if they can't step up. So we want the professional, well-financed, well-structured teams to be potentially entering Formula One in the future, and that would be a measure of our success. But they won't come in today, but I hope we can create the environment by then that makes it much more appealing.
And I don't think this is necessarily on the table for 2021, but do you ever see a day when Formula One might return to the old style engine specs, like the V10s or the V12s of yesteryear?
There's a part of me which would love that to happen. I think, when you go, I was at Goodwood, say Festival of Speed at the weekend, and there were some Formula One cars running there with old engines, and it makes you realise the emotion that you used to get from those engines, and I do love them. I don't see how we could make that step back without such a radical revolution. We'd alienate or we'd really polarise Formula One and split it apart. The manufacturers we have in Formula One at the moment are committed to the engines we have now, and should we have a revolution? I don't think so. I'd love to have those engines, but it's not going to happen. So we need to evolve the engines we have now and learn the lessons from introducing these engines to see how we can take them in a direction that perhaps is a bit more appealing to the fans. I think one of the tragedies of this engine we have now is actually it's a miracle of engineering. I mean, the efficiency of these engines is astonishing. The power we generate for the fuel efficiency and economy is, and we don't talk about it. We don't publicise it. We don't emphasise it. And I think we've missed an opportunity there. And certainly, we want to evolve the engine to make it more appealing, to make it more economic. And importantly, we need to evolve the engine to a point where more manufacturers will want to come in and take it to a condition where it is more appealing. But I love the old engines, but unfortunately I don't think they're going to come back into Formula One.
So we're not going to the old engines, but a word as well on Formula E, and obviously as electric cars on the road become more common, do you see something like Formula E as a threat to Formula One?
I think we have to respect what Formula E is doing and what it's achieving. I mean, if you look at the magnitude of the two, they're not really comparable. I mean, the number of fans we have, the appeal of Formula One. Formula E is still very junior in that respect. I think Formula One will evolve in a direction that has the right balance of sport and relevance and engagement with the fans. And if in 5 years' time or 10 years' time or whenever there is a need, desire, wish to have a different type of power unit in Formula 1, we'll do it. I mean, there's nothing to stop us having electric Formula 1 cars in the future. At the moment, they don't deliver the spectacle. With all due respect, if you go to a Formula E race, it's a pretty junior category of motor racing. It's a great event in terms of all of the stuff that's going on around it, but the race itself is pretty tame when you compare it to a Formula 1 event. The cars are not particularly fast. They don't have the personalities involved. It's a smaller junior formula, but they're doing a fabulous job of the event, making it a street party. But Formula 1's different to that. Formula 1 is the pinnacle of motorsport. The speeds we do, the caliber of drivers we have, the caliber of teams we have. And if that moves in, say, 5 or 10 years' time to a different power source, then we'll do it if that's the thing that is most appealing and achieves what we want to achieve. I don't see Formula 1 necessarily being locked into internal combustion engines forever. But who knows where we are in 10 years. 10 years ago, I don't think many people would be able to predict where the world is now. And therefore, I don't know where we're going to be in 10 years' time. But Formula 1 will move in the right direction.
And another question that often comes up is around female drivers in F1. Is there any particular plan to try and get more female drivers involved?
This is always an awkward subject. We'd love female drivers in Formula 1. I mean, for appeal in all sorts of ways, we'd love to see successful Formula 1 drivers, but we don't want to create an artificial environment. I think where it has to start is at the very base levels, karting, junior forms of racing. And there's been a traditional boys and cars connection. And so the number of boys coming through motorsport vastly outnumbers girls coming through motorsport. And therefore, the chances of success are much more limited to girls just based on numbers, number of people competing. And it has to be said that driving a Formula 1 car in the past was an incredibly physical exercise. And there are the simple principles that men on average are stronger than women physically. And that driving a Formula 1 car was, particularly when there was no power steering and there were gear changes and things, was a pretty massive physical effort. And girls did it. I mean, we've had Davina Galitsa, we've had women race in Formula 1, and they've done a good job. And we'd love to have women involved in Formula 1 for all sorts of reasons. But I think it has to start at the base level. I think we have to give more opportunities. We have to give more encouragement. There's a charity now, Dare to Be Different. Susie Wolf started a charity to encourage women to get into motor racing or motor racing related technologies. And that's doing great work, and we're supporting that wherever we can. So undoubtedly there's been a physical challenge to Formula 1, which has meant there's been some selectiveness that's happened in the past. That's declining because the cars in some ways have become less physical. Power steering means sheer strength is not needed. But it has to start at the beginning.
So we've talked quite a lot about the future. Time for a little bit of nostalgia as well. What is your favourite era within Formula 1?
I mean, as an enthusiast, that's probably where I started. I mean, I started with my dad in the 60s. So And I must admit, whenever we have some of the historic cars racing with us as a support race, I always go and have a look at them. And the simplicity and classic profiles of the old Formula 1 cars. Yeah, the Lotus of Jim Park, the very slimline ones initially, but even the ones like Emerson Fittipaldi or of that era, Graham Hill drove Lotus 49. There's, those sort of cars I loved. They still had a beautiful simplicity to them. Even aerodynamics were starting to become a factor. They, with the cigar-shaped monocoques and the engine exposed with the exhaust and relatively small tyres. That was the era I loved. That from a nostalgic point of view. That was a very special time for me, and that was my formative period of becoming a motorsport enthusiast.
So we have one more question for you, Ross, and it's the most important question. You were once associated with regularly having a banana to snack on the pit wall, I think particularly during your Ferrari days. Is a banana still a regular part of your working day?
It is. I commute now, so I get up fairly early and jump on a train. And because it's so early, I don't have breakfast at home, but I always take a banana with me to eat on the way just to sustain me until I get to the office. And then I have a bowl of porridge from the local cafe around here when I get to the office, and a cup of coffee. So I do normally have a banana first thing in the morning to keep me going before I get to the office, and I can eat that on the go. I eat it in the car driving to the station. But I found one of the Italian motorsport magazines used to have a regular cartoon, and I found the copy they gave me. They gave me the original, and it was me in my Ferrari uniform, and my belt was all full of bananas, and I had a pair of bananas, like a pair of guns, so it was like a six-shooter with my bananas, and it was great, and it was a lot of fun. It was something which, I don't know how it grew, I used to like to have a little snack on the pit wall during a race. It was some way of distracting, providing a distraction, and then it grew to the point where whenever I got on the pit wall, there was a bunch of bananas coming.
Well, that's a great insight to finish on. Ross, thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, and thank you all for sending in. Thank you all for sending in great set of questions. And it's been a real pleasure.